Hello and welcome back to Deep Rock, everybody. Today we're going to be going over the Boomstick and loadouts done quickly for the Boomstick. For this, we're going to be talking about all 6 of the Boomstick's overclocks, and we're going to be pairing it with a primary weapon that complements it. Always keep in mind that there is plenty of builds for each of these overclocks, and there's plenty of options for each of these overclocks too. This won't be a full in-depth video about each overclock. Those will be saved for different videos. Let's begin with our very first overclock, which is an unstable one. This is Jumbo Shells. Jumbo Shells gives you a massive amount more damage per pellet. However, it cuts down on your reload speed and it cuts down on your overall ammo. This one has always been a very solid overclock for the Boomstick, letting you do really high damage at close to medium range. And the way I have it built is usually like this. So in tier 1, I like taking extra ammo. This is to go back up to a normal-ish amount of ammo. You could go with all ammo here, but I find that just one ammo is generally enough to go back up. Usually I'm just using this for big things. Then in tier 2, I'm going with the faster reload speed. Now that the reload speed has been corrected, it was sort of bugged before or didn't function quite the way that it was supposed to before, where if you had a faster rate of fire you would also reload quicker. Now the reload speed is a pretty good option, although double barrel is a really good option too if you want more burst damage. In tier 3, I'm going with more pellets so that we have even more damage with this. Mostly I'm going to be using this for really big targets. It does great for chunking out dreadnoughts. It's also really good for taking care of things like oppressors and praetorians. In tier 4, I'm going with blow-through rounds. This is just so that if we do have to use this against crowds, we should be able to kill them fairly effectively, and we can punch through multiple bugs this way. You could also go with the armor breaking here if you want a little bit more damage towards big things like praetorians, or I guess guards as well. And then in tier 5, we're going with the white phosphorus rounds. This is just so that we can get some fire damage on the Boomstick. Unlike other options that change your damage to fire, this actually doesn't really nerf your damage with the Boomstick. Generally, you're just getting more damage. So that one really helps here. Although Fear the Boomstick is pretty good here too if you would like to take that option, just to scare away bugs and be a little bit safer in between shots. Or if you're not running Board Ready, but you do want Born Ready, you could always take the auto reload too. That would be an option. The main idea with Jumbo Shells is usually get close, deal really high damage to the weak spot. If you can do that, then you'll be doing really well with this overclock. I like to pair this one with something that's good for crowd control. For this, I'm taking Impact Deflection for the Drac. This will let me have bouncy rounds, and this way I can use this against the small and medium bugs, and use it out to a longer range, and then use the double barrel just at very close range to deal really high damage to big targets. As for our second build, we're going to be using Special Powder. Special Powder is a clean overclock for the Boomstick. That is probably one of the most fun overclocks in the entire game. This makes it so long as you hop up off the ground or you're knocked off the ground and you fire the shotgun, you will fly in the opposite direction. So you can send yourself flying upward, you can send yourself flying backward, you can potentially send yourself flying downward, although that's usually not a good thing because you could hit the ground and kill yourself easier that way. So this can be used as a mobility tool, but aside from that, it doesn't actually come at any downside to the Boomstick, and the Boomstick is pretty good for crowd control. The way I have it built is like this, so I'm taking extra ammo in tier 1. This is just so that I can use it more often for the utility, although damage is good here too. Tier 2, I like taking the faster reload speed, but the double trigger can also be really good so that you can fire out both barrels really quick to send yourself flying even higher if you want. Totally your choice, or if you want to have more burst damage. Tier 3, again, I'm taking extra ammo just so that we can have more shells with this, so I can use it more often as a mobility tool, but anywhere fine in tier 3. In tier 4, I'm once again going with blow-through rounds. This will get us more damage towards crowds, and we're already pretty good against crowds, so that's usually the way I have this build. And then in tier 5, we're also going with white phosphorus rounds, although any of them in tier 5 are really good with this one. Pick whichever one you'd like. White phosphorus will get you the most damage. Fear the Boomstick keeps you a little bit safer, although you're usually pretty safe if you're jumping up in the air. For a primary weapon, I'm going to be pairing this with Hover Clock for the M1000. Hover Clock pairs really well with Special Powder, since then you can float when you're in midair, and just like Special Powder, this doesn't come at any downside to your weapon. So the M1000 will still hit just as hard as it did before. Use the M1000 at long range, use the Boomstick at close range. Moving on to our third build, we're going to be talking about the brand new Double Barrel, and the Double Barrel is pretty awesome now. It used to be the most underwhelming overclock in the game in my opinion. Now it is an exceptionally fun overclock. Double Barrel is now an unstable overclock. That makes it so every time that you fire your shotgun, you do have to fire out both barrels. However, this comes with a massive damage buff now to the shockwave that your Boomstick generates directly in front of it. This is a 4-meter cone that is directly in front of the Boomstick, and you will deal extra damage with that. You can actually deal a ton of damage with this. It's really, really good for crowds and can be really good for big targets. It's just you do have to get very close to use it effectively. Aside from that, the Boomstick is also a little bit less accurate with this overclock, so your spread is a bit wider, but if you're just using it at close range, that's not going to be much of an issue. It also technically comes with the downside of getting you double recoil, although every time you fire this, you're going to have to reload it anyway, so that isn't so bad for making follow-up shots. The way I like to build it is like this. In tier 1, I'm taking extra ammo so I can use this more often. In tier 2, I'm going with the faster reload. There's no reason to take double trigger in this since you can't fire out both triggers. It's always going to be double trigger, and in this case, I would always recommend to take the faster reload speed. In tier 3, more ammo so that we can use this even more often. In tier 4, improved shockwave, which I had never really taken this before because it really wasn't worth it with the other overclocks. It's definitely worth it now with the double barrel since you do massive damage to everything in front of you. And then in tier 5, white phosphorus rounds, but again, any of them in tier 5 are pretty good. Fear the Boomstick is pretty nice with this too, just because you can scare away any enemies that you don't kill, although a lot of the times you'll usually stun any enemies that's directly in front of the Boomstick and light them on fire, and then they'll probably die, assuming they're not a really big enemy or an enemy that can't be lit on fire like a Dreadnought. Since this does so well at close range, I decided to pair it with a primary weapon that does really well at long range. I'm going to be taking AI Stability Engine for the GK2. This was another overclock that technically got changed in Season 3 once the GK2 got buffed, and now it is really strong. This lets you do really high damage at very long range, but it does have kind of a slow rate of fire, so it makes it a little bit weaker at close range. That's not a problem since your double barrel will cover everything at close range and deal massive crowd damage. Moving on to our 4th overclock, we have Shape Shells. This is a balanced overclock. This makes it so you have less ammo with the shotgun, however you have a tighter spread pattern now with the shotgun by 50%. So it goes the opposite direction of double barrel, which is pretty good. This makes it so your shotgun becomes pretty capable at long and medium range. It's actually pretty easy to pick off high value targets at a distance, deal really high damage to things like menaces or acid spitters or whatever it might be. The way I like to build it is like this. So in tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo. This you could take extra damage with. I'm just taking the extra ammo to make up for the lack of ammo that we had, but extra damage is pretty good too because it's pretty easy to hit most of your shots. Tier 2, your call, pick whichever one of these you'd like. I'm taking the faster reload. Tier 3, I'm going with more pellets so that we can just hit more damage at a distance, although more ammo could also be really good here. In tier 4, I'm going with armor breaking. I find this one to be pretty nice with this particular overclock since the shot pattern is pretty enclosed. It's very easy to smack bigger enemies wherever you would like. Blow-through round still works really well with this one though too, so if you want to take that, feel free to take it. And then in tier 5, I'm going with white phosphorus rounds, but once again, any of them are good. This just gets us fire damage on top of the boomstick. Now we can use the boomstick at medium, close, and somewhat to long range, so any overclock kind of works pretty well with this one. And I took a primary weapon that is a little bit less ammo efficient. I'm taking Overtuned Particle Accelerator for the Drac Plasma Carbine, so that we can use that at very close range to deal really high damage. For our 5th overclock, we're going to be using compact shells. This is a clean overclock that just gets you a faster rate of fire and more ammo. I'm going to build it so that it takes more advantage of those two aspects by stacking as much ammo and as much reload speed as I can on this. So in tier 1, I'm taking extra ammo just so that I can have more of it. Tier 2, I'm going to the faster reload, so we get down to about a 1-second reload, which is very, very fast for the double barrel. Tier 3, I'm going with more ammo so I can stack that even higher, and now we have up to 50 rounds extra with the shotgun, so it is very good for crowd control, and it makes it so it takes a long time to run out of shots with this. Tier 4, we're going with blow-through rounds so we can punch through as many enemies as possible, and in Tier 5, white phosphorus rounds once again so we can get some extra fire damage. Again, the other Tier 5 options are good too. This is a clean overclock, and it is just a bonus, so any build that you like running with the double barrel will work just fine with this one. This is just the one that I chose. For a primary weapon, I'm going to be taking the M1000 with electrifying focus shots. This is an unstable overclock that makes it so we do less damage with our focus shots, but the focus shots do electrocute enemies, dealing damage over time. You could honestly take anything that you want as a primary weapon with compact shells, though they all work very well. And then for our 6th and final overclock, where you're going to be using Stuff Shells. Stuff Shells gives you 1 more damage per pellet and 1 more pellet in the shotgun. That is really good. The way that I have this built is just all for damage, so I'm just building it up similar to how I built up the compact shells. This way I can do really high burst damage with this. So in Tier 1, I'm going with extra ammo so that we hit enemies a little bit harder. In Tier 2, I'm going with double trigger so we can have more burst damage. In Tier 3, we're going with more pellets so we have the maximum amount of damage that we can have whenever we hit an enemy. Tier 4, we're going with blow-through rounds to hit through multiple enemies, although the armor breaking would also work here pretty well too if you wanted to hit bigger enemies. And then in Tier 5, white phosphorus rounds so that we can deal extra damage to more of the enemies. Since we're going with all damage with our boomstick, I decided to take a primary weapon that gives us a little bit more ammo and can kind of work at longer ranges like the boomstick can't do so well. So I took the GK2 once again, and this time I'm going to be running compact ammo with it, which is a clean overclock that just gets you a nice bonus to the GK2, giving you a little bit more ammo, a little bit more reload speed. Going to be using the GK2 at long and medium range just to pick off things, and then I'm going to be using the boomstick just to deal really high damage to big targets, similar to the way that I would use it for like jumbo shells. Just I have more shots with this. And that does it for the boomstick's overclocks. It's really cool that the boomstick, at least with double barrel, got changed. I really love the new double barrel. I think it's great, and the rest of the boomstick overclocks are pretty good too. The only other overclock that I think got changed somewhat recently was shape shells, which definitely did get buffed where it just got an ammo nerf rather than a damage nerf. I think I like that more so than the other way around. Tell me your thoughts thoughts on the Boomstick down in the comments below. What builds do you really enjoy running? What would you recommend? And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you guys so very much for watching. If you haven't seen my other loadouts done quick, be sure to click over here. There should be a link to it somewhere. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye!